Hello and welcome to our podcast, Belonging Beyond Borders. This podcast is brought to you by InterVarsity ISM at McGill. This podcast explores themes of culture, displacement, belonging, hearing stories from various community members. We are continuing our series called Do I Belong? Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of our podcast. We are continuing with our series that's called Do I Belong? And today we have a very special guest, Rhea, who is joining us, and we can't wait to hear what she has to tell us today. So yeah, Rhea, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, tell us who you are and where you're from, and we'll start there. We'll start with those two questions.
Right.
Take it away.
Well, hello everyone. It's great to be here. Thank you for having me here, Danielle. My name is Rhea, and I am a PhD student at École de Technologie Supérieure. I've been living in Montreal for about 2.5 years now, and I'm from India.
So why don't you take us back to the very beginning, your childhood, your upbringing. Tell us more.
So I was born in India, specifically Calcutta, which is on the east of India. And when I was really young, I moved to the US, and we stayed there for 5 years. So I spent most of my formative years there. And then we moved back to India. So I did my entire schooling and undergrad in India. And then I moved again to the US for my postgrad studies. So I did my master's in Illinois, and then from there I moved to Canada for my PhD.
Wow, that's awesome. So you've lived in a few different countries now.
Yes, and I've loved every minute of it. It's been a thing that I've started enjoying exploring and living in a different country, and because after this I'm also planning to move to London in a few years. So
wow,
that's going to be another new adventure.
Yeah, that's great. So you've lived a few different places, and now you're also planning to move to the UK in the future. That's really exciting. What is it that's been unique about each place that you've lived? Like, what has stood out to you? What did you enjoy about like each different place?
I think I feel like because I've done most of my schooling and some form of education in most different places. It corresponds to an age group where you would do something typical in that place. Like India usually brings back memories of home and childhood. And when I went to the US, I was doing my master's. It was more fun. There was that slight, how do I put it, a more experimental phase, I guess. So I really enjoyed it. It was a big university town, and I had the sort of excitement of enjoying a large town just full of students. And then when I moved to Montreal, I feel like this is more like that carefree, lively days in your 20s sort of feel. I moved here alone, so I made friends with very lovely people who also moved here alone. So it was more like we all had our roots somewhere else, and we all came here and made something special and new. So I feel like that was really unique and special about here. And I hope to have more unique adventures in the UK later on, which would probably be very different from here as well.
You mentioned that most of the places were connected to schooling or education. I just wondered, like, how did you find the difference from one place to the next in terms of the education system? Was it easy to adapt to? Was it easy to adjust to a different approach to learning, or what were there differences?
There were quite a few differences, and in some ways it was easier. In a lot of ways it was actually challenging. But I felt like keeping an open mind helped a lot. For example, when I did my undergrad in India and then moved to the US, the way you were given assignments in your master's program and the way you were expected to be more collaborative, ask the professor for help. I did not know how to do that. So I learned that in the US, that, oh, you could use their office hours to ask good questions, which was very different from what I was used to. And then when I moved to Montreal, the education system again was a little bit different. Again, because I'm doing my PhD, it's a lot more independent than what I would expect from a master's program at all.
Right.
But then there was this, because I studied in a French university, I also had to quickly pick up the basics of the language. Everyone was really warm and helpful in making sure that I don't get lost while trying to navigate in a language I had just no base in. But I think that was certainly something I did not face before. This was the first time I was facing being in a place where the majority speaks a language I am not comfortable in.
Right.
And but overall, I think there's that same attitude of everyone wanting you to ask questions here. It's helpful that you learn how to ask what you need, and I've just enjoyed learning that process.
So you've had so many different experiences in different places, and tell us, what are some of the skills that you have learned in these different environments?
One of the more challenging skills is being comfortable being uncomfortable. So whenever I move to a new country, there will be a period of time when I won't have as many friends, when the roads will seem uncomfortable, and the people around me will seem a little strange. Once that tourist excitement, it wears off and you start living in a place, you start feeling a little homesick. But that is the time I feel when embracing that strangeness is really useful. And instead of looking at it with fear, I try to look at it as a sense of adventure, that this is something new I can explore. And I think that helped in Montreal as well, where the French culture of the city was something very new to me, and I could use the fests they have, the music fests, the summer concerts, to explore the French culture, and in the process hopefully improve my own skills in the language as well. Yeah.
Would you say that there were moments, because sometimes people, when they're new to a place and they maybe don't have that many friends at the beginning, they'll kind of be focused more like inward, or they won't really go out and explore, whereas there's other types of people that are maybe a little bit more adventurous, and they'll sort of put themselves out there. Even if they don't have anyone to enjoy those experiences with, they'll still go out and enjoy it. How were you able, first of all, to start to make friends, and then also how were you able to embrace the moments where it was just you by yourself?
Again, I'm very introverted, so enjoying moments by myself is something I'm comfortable with. It's my favorite thing to do.
Yeah.
It's more about putting myself out there, trying to network with people where I don't know whether they'll be my friends later or not. That was the scarier part for me. But I think this is a good place to learn that. It's a place where when you're new to a place, nobody knows you. You're not surrounded by the limiting beliefs you might have had in the place where a lot of people knew you. So this is a place where you can reinvent yourself. You don't have to be that shy, introverted person. You can be a outspoken person and make mistakes. That's fine. Nobody's going to remember you. That's a good thing.
So you have like an opportunity to just spread your wings a little bit and not maybe care about like what others think. You're kind of breaking out of that typical norm or whatever, and just exploring things like firsthand. It's you and your unique experience, and not based off of others and maybe what they're telling you to do, or not based off of any preconceived ideas as well. It's just completely just, I like what you said about seeing it as an adventure.
It's a good way to explore yourself as well. There are many things I did not know about myself, which I started realizing once I moved to a new place and nobody said I could not be that person. An example would probably be like, I really enjoy Canadian winters. I'm from a tropical country and we're afraid of winters actually. But I've come here and and I did come with a lot of trepidation that the winters might be harsh, I might fall sick, I may not have fun because I might be cooped up in indoors. But because I saw how the locals were enjoying winters, I remember it was my first winter here and I went outside. It was -20. It's a temperature I've never experienced before, and I thought I would just go to the park and then just head back home. And I saw all these children, they were 5, 6 years old, and they were having the time of their lives. And that inspired me. If they can enjoy the winters, why can't I?
Right.
So it was a part which I didn't know before, and then I started observing how Canadians enjoy winter, and I tried to adapt to that. I tried playing a few winter sports, tried ice skating, and it's the time I look forward to nowadays.
You did sledding as well. I remember that. Yeah. And I remember that day you were so cold, and then you had like your eyes were like tearing like profusely. But I was like very impressed because you were just like, yes, we're gonna do this.
That's the other part. I can look at others and who have been through this and learn from you how to take care of yourself during a time when I have no experience with this season at all.
So you mentioned about like experiencing the winter, and you mentioned about just embracing and discovering new sides of yourself. How have you been able to embrace your Indian culture while also Canadian culture? What does that look like for you? How do you approach that?
I think that is something which took time, and I'm still exploring it as I'm out here. At first, I remember there is definitely a phase when I was more lost, and I felt like I should be if I want to be a Canadian living in Montreal, I should be exactly how a typical Montrealer looks like. And then what does a typical Montrealer look like? I think one big thing is that I've tended to live in places with really diverse communities. So you could always, it's encouraged to be, you're encouraged to be yourself in cities like Montreal. And I don't know if that's a possibility in every single city in the world. There are some cities where the culture is more monocultural, but in my experience, I've lived mostly in very diverse places, which embraces your uniqueness, along with trying to sort of embrace their own flavor as well, like the culture of Montreal as well. Yeah, it takes time, I think. I used to go back to India, and I remember whenever I would go back to India, the first week I would have trouble readjusting to the culture of my own city. And sometimes that feels a little bit like an identity crisis, because if your own hometown doesn't feel like yours, that tends to be a little what?
Awkward, maybe?
Awkward, yes. This time when I did go back, I got married, so we did it.
Congratulations!
Thank you. So, yeah, I had that initial fear of not being Indian enough, or not being that perfect Indian bride, which I think even if you are living in India, you would still have that fear. But I instead had a lot of fun in my own weddings, and I appreciated that. And when I came back, I wanted to keep a few things that um, show that you're a new Indian bride, new Indian Hindu bride, as a part of my identity here as well. So I try wearing a sindoor, which is this little red dot on my forehead, but I try to keep it also with my own, with the identity I have in Montreal as well. Um, yeah, it's always a balancing act, I feel, and I learn as I go.
Yeah. Can you share with us what it was like being an Indian bride and just some of the struggles you faced trying to bring in all these different worlds together, embracing your own uniqueness and being not needing to meet others' expectations, but being able to embrace these different aspects of yourself?
Mm-hmm. So weddings in India, they're a grand affair. They go on for more than 2 days, and there's a lot of pressure put on brides, new brides, into looking a certain way, behaving a certain way, and meeting everyone's expectations. It can be quite a lot. So I've seen that a lot of brides don't get to enjoy their wedding in the process. When I was getting married, I also had felt like there were expectations I might not have been meeting. My husband, he's not from my culture, and I'm from a Bengali family. Um, and it, even though right now in India it's getting more popular to marry outside your culture, it's still not the norm. And it did raise a few eyebrows when we both brought um, our own rituals during the wedding and made a wedding which was the best of both worlds. But I felt like once the wedding got over, everyone really had a really good time and they got to experience something unique in the process. And the best part, as a bride, I enjoyed my own wedding a lot. I had a lot of fun. I think that that had to do with not being someone I am not, and trying to let go of things where I simply cannot meet another person's expectations. Mm-hmm.
Wow, that sounds like such a beautiful celebration of two people coming together as one and bringing in all these like different elements. And you said that you had fun at your wedding, which is like, wow, that's amazing. So what would you say would be like one of the memories that stands out to you the most, that kind of reflects, I guess, what you're sharing on?
Probably the entry of the bride. Traditionally, in my culture, the bride is carried by her brothers on a wooden plank, and she's taken
Nice.
in, and she covers her face with two betel leaves, um, and her brothers walk around the groom 7 times.
Okay.
I did not want to be carried on a wooden plank, and I don't have brothers. I'm an only child. What I did have, who I did have, are friends, lovely girlfriends who um, were from different parts of my life, and they all saw sides of me. They were all there for me when I was either sick or at a very low point in my life. I had my childhood best friend from school. I had my roommate from college who um, took care of me when I was really sick. I had a friend from Montreal who carried me to the hospital this one time when I was, again, very sick. And they all came to my wedding, and I had them instead carry a sort of a four-poster floral roof over my head, which in my husband's culture they call it a chadar, and I incorporated that little bit into the bridal entry instead. So I still had betel leaves covering my face as an ode to my Bengali culture, but I had my four very strong girlfriends lifting. I had my cousin sister being the fourth girl, lift the four poster and take me to the and walk with me down the aisle.
Wow.
So I felt like that was really precious to me. And as a little sign in the back, I also had Canon and D playing.
That's
With some
amazing.
sitar.
With a sitar.
With
Oh
a sitar,
wow.
yeah.
That's so awesome.
I personally really love that piece, and I thought it would be a little nod to my more North American side of me right now.
For those of you that don't know, Canon and D is like a typical wedding entrance song that's played.
And it played throughout the entire wedding.
Oh.
Someone forgot to switch it off.
There you go. The entrance and beyond. So I kind of want to take us back to some of the topic of education. You'd mentioned that earlier in the conversation. And I wanted to ask you, like, more specifically, because, like, that's something that even for myself is hard for me to necessarily see or get, that the approaches to education are different, like styles of teaching being different. What are some challenges that someone from India coming to Canada, maybe even the US, but maybe we'll focus on Canada, might experience, and how can they sort of prepare themselves, or what are some things that they should keep in mind when they're coming and sitting in Canada?
I think one of the most challenging, and maybe it's really different from India, that I personally face is how we write our assignments. And in India we tend to, it's alright if we do not cite our sources or take a piece of information from the internet and copy it straight down without paraphrasing. It's alright to not reference things, and I feel like that doesn't fly well.
No.
You might be charged for plagiarism if you try that here. It's important to know what the rules are in your course, and it's always a good idea to ask your professor, look through the syllabus before you take on the assignments, instead of it being like a midterm thing, like right before you're supposed to submit the assignment you realize that, oh, I cannot copy this entire essay down from a random blog post which was written by someone who is not who probably doesn't have proper credentials, and just pass that off as an assignment. Yes, so it's good to understand how to cite and reference your sources when you're writing assignments. It's good to talk to your professor on how they would like you to do that. And it's good to understand how you could potentially plagiarize in assignments. I feel like that's something which is not taught in India, at least when I was studying in India. It might be taught now.
Wow, yeah, that's such an important thing that, of course, like, that's not something I would ever even know that others could do that. So, there's legal issues and stuff with that here, because it's like, oh, that's not your original authentic work.
Exactly.
Do you see, like, in, I don't know, between Canadian culture and Indian culture, is there something within that you can see, like, why that might be?
I think in a lot of Indian institutions, especially when we're younger, the focus is more on executing, even assignments. It's more about getting a proper grade in the assignments rather than what we're learning from that assignment. I think a lot is changing over the last few years, though, as a lot of Indian institutions are getting more international standards involved in their education system. But this was back maybe 7 years ago, this was, or even like maybe 10 years ago now, this was the case in most Indian schools. And this often teaches people to probably work well in teams, but not work well on your own individual work. And that is something I see a lot of Indians struggle with, including myself, when we first arrive here and work on our first academic project and then realize that everything needs to be referenced, everything needs to be coming from a proper source if it's taken from someone else's work. And if it's from your own work, only then can you not have a reference for it. There's a lot of importance given to individuality and having an originality to your own work, which is something which we might need to change our mindset about when we shift from India to Canada.
So you mentioned this aspect of individualism and how most people in Montreal, they're so unique, they're so different because everyone is diverse and like their own unique unicorn doing their own thing, and like being in a new place gives you the freedom to be around people you might not normally go attend events you might not normally attend. So you've been involved and you've been joining for InterVarsity ISM events, you've been part of the community. What made you connect to that community? Why was that important to you to go to that space?
Initially, I think I wanted to just make new friends. So the original intent was just finding people who were close about my age, wanted to do fun things like go apple picking in the fall, and just be a part of that. And from there, I slowly found a very welcoming and warm and accepting atmosphere over there. I think that's what drew me in the most, because especially when you are when you want to explore and learn more about someone else's religion, there comes a lot of sensitivity with it, where you're scared. What if you ask the wrong thing? What if you offend anyone by just being in a different religion? But I never found that in ISM. In fact, people were very, very warm and accepting and curious about my own religion as well. And I really enjoyed that, and I felt like this was a very safe space where I could just relax and just learn about another religion. I did not know much about Christianity at all from my upbringing, and it was something I even made friends with Indian Christians, and I wasn't very aware of the Christian community in India before that, so that was really nice to learn about. And I feel like it's a way to broaden my own experience as well, and make space for, and maybe even think about certain aspects of spirituality I haven't considered before. So it always gets me thinking, and it also makes me ask questions about my own religion, because I have to answer people who don't know about my own religion, and that gets me questioning that. So it's overall a safe space where everyone can just ask questions to each other, and nobody seems to get offended in the process, and I think that's what makes it very welcoming and safe.
Thank you for sharing that. So being from a Hindu religion, when you started to attend Christian events, was there anything in particular that surprised you that you weren't expecting to see?
I think the age of people, probably, because a lot of young people seem to be very interested and religious in the Christian community. In my background, at least, just like from where I'm from, it seemed like you were expected to be spiritual when you're a little older, and now it's more of a carefree, do your own thing sort of vibe. While when I attend any Christian events, I see a lot of very young people, barely out of their teens, even many teenagers take on leadership positions in conducting the event, and it's actually quite inspiring. It's probably something I would like to take back to my own community in India as well. Just see more young people take a lead in more spiritual discussions.
And would you say from those people, would you say that there's a certain amount of like joy, or like it's when you see people like taking on those opportunities and being more involved, do you see it from a perspective of like, oh, they maybe they feel they have to do it, or do you kind of see that maybe it's like from their own,
Yes,
I don't know, their joy or their own passion?
Yes,
with their
of
own
course.
just like love for God.
Yes, it seems to come from within, just a sense of them doing their thing, and it seems like spirituality takes a big role in young people's lives here, which and it's not something forced upon by community, but just young kids having their own beliefs. So that was actually quite heartwarming to see, and yeah, it definitely comes from a place of joy.
Yeah, it's very interesting to me because in Canada we mostly just have, like, in terms of belief systems, like in my upbringing at least, it's either you're Christian or you're atheist or you're maybe undecided, so we don't get exposed really to other faiths. So it's interesting to me because actually it's like kind of said that most people are like not Christian. So it's very interesting that you've had this other, like, a counter experience than what maybe the majority people assume or think is happening. So I feel like that's just, yeah, it's very encouraging to hear that, and it's been really amazing to also learn more about you and your experiences and where you come from and your religious upbringing as well. So we've really enjoyed having you around and having you part of our group.
Yeah. I've had a great time here too. Thank you for having me here.
Yeah. So maybe we can just close and you can tell the viewers any final advice you'd want to give our viewers that are watching, any final words of wisdom.
I would just say be comfortable being uncomfortable when you're in a new place, and have fun with it. Try to see the joy in the adventure. It's something you will probably look back upon and wonder, wow, that was a big feat that I did. So yeah, keep having that positive vibe going on when you're experiencing something new.
Yeah, it's been so great to have you on our podcast, Rhea. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.